All right, TC39-TG3, Wednesday, June the 5th, 2024. This is the last TG3 meeting prior to the next TC39 meeting next week. Of particular interest right now are topics that will be coming up next week at plenary.
And everyone can see the agenda.
Yes.
I noticed there's an item on there for a task group report from us, which seems entirely appropriate, but it does raise the question of what is our report going to be? And I presume, Chris, you'll be the one making it?
You're going to have to be more specific.
Oh, yes. Chris, not Calvert.
Maybe.
Maybe.
Anyone is welcome to do it.
Okay.
We you know, I imagine it'll be pretty similar to last time's update, which was, here are some things we've been talking about. You know, because we didn't have anything like to bring to plenary like that, you know, asking for consensus for anything or any deliverables and the like. So really just an update that what we're doing, meeting regularly, talking about proposals and other assorted sundry topics.
Yeah, I think if we used that space for anything, it would be to invite people to put things on the agenda. I don't think that we have anything to share. Unless I'm mistaken.
I think that sounds right to me.
All right. So let's see.
Yeah, I try to keep it brief because folks, you know, plenary is there's a lot of other things that we need to do at plenary meetings, and if folks are interested in what TG3 are doing, they should just come to these meetings rather than expect us to tell them all of the wonderful things we're doing here in great detail anyway.
All right, so proposals, eval changes for trusted types update. I think that we're up to date on this one.
I agree.
And then base 64, I believe we are interested in, well, Agoric is interested in, but it's, there are no security concerns. Omit padding into base 64. That might be interesting. I think the worst I imagine is that we will, I'm sure, want to ensure that the base 64 representation round trips from a, so it's a canonicalizable base 64, but I'm told that the security position on base 64 in general is to not use it in anything canonicalizable, so it's perhaps a non-issue. Intel, temporal, Shadow Realm, status, FYI. I think that we were in general encouraging Promise Try. Jordan's going to propose a question about regex escape. Do you want to prime us with that question, Jordan?
I'd have to pull up the issue. I don't have it ready, but it's about like, should we, how much should we escape? So at the current state is where Kevin and I are happy with, but the remaining question, where is it?
I'm looking for it too.
Yeah, actually, it doesn't seem to be an issue. It's a comment at the bottom of that path stage 4 issue that is linked to. So, oh, maybe not.
Use of character escapes, I think, is the primary question. I specifically requested that it be discussed in plenary.
Yeah. So, like, in other words, I'm going to try and summarize it. I think that we have like a backslash in a character in a number of places, which would preclude, I think, the ability to add new meaning in regexes for those escape sequences. And the request, I believe, was to use like hex escapes so that that is not closed off. That's the upside. The downside is that the regex becomes much longer and less readable.
Oh,
ahead.
so the basic security constraint would be met either way, correct?
Yes,
It's not-
exactly
Yes.
right. It's
Okay,
a like
so-
future design consideration and aesthetics question, not a
Okay.
security.
Okay. I'm going to express abstention on this one. I'm on the fence. Not because I care about the readability, but because I'm ambivalent about whether we should continue to leave open more options for extending regex syntax, or whether we should take the opportunity to close some of those off.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we should opportunistically do that, but I think that it's highly unlikely anyone will ever want to introduce new escapes. And so I just don't see the point in preserving that design space. Right? Like I don't see it, I don't look at it personally as closing it off, even though that's what it will do. I look at it as like making this proposal better and not versus making this proposal worse in exchange for the possibility of something that I don't think is very useful.
Okay, so I remain ambivalent. I don't much care.
Right.
I also don't much care, but experience suggests that I point out that an escaped regular expression that's captured into a database and then shared with a future version of the JavaScript runtime probably should behave as it did when it was stored.
Well, yeah. No,
Yeah.
yeah, it would have to. So that is, I think, the argument for this change would be like, or that what you're describing is why, if we ship the character escapes, then we have closed off that design thing, because that would be creating a security issue.
Mm.
If we then added like, so if the quoted thing in the chat is like /@ so if we added that in the future, then that would be a problem if somebody had previously used escape to produce a /@. And so therefore, if we produce the /@ we can never make that be anything. So we are effectively closing off that design space by doing it now. If we make the change into the hex thing, then it does not close off any design space, and it also does not create any potential for security issues, therefore, which is why the design space is open. It's all kind of like,
Yeah.
if this, then
Yeah.
that.
And with regular expressions, it's always like escaped or not can be meaningful, which
Yeah.
makes it harder.
Mhm.
So like if I valued the ability to add new character escapes in the future, then Richard's change is the obvious and only thing to do, right? It's because I don't value that I then second to that, I do value human readability, and that I prefer the way it is. But like, if the balance of the committee has a preference, I'll just defer to that.
Well, as it is right now, in this case, I think there's no way, even if you value the readability, you don't actually get it.
No. I mean, it's already much less readable than it was originally because of some needs / requests. So true, but readability is not binary; it's a spectrum, and less ugly versus more ugly is still a readability thing.
Again, I am ambivalent, but given that this design hinges on the issue of whether there is essentially a spec invariant about the if we are closing off the design space, we should probably record that.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, the discussion in plenary will have to note that, as we've discussed it today, right? So
Yeah.
part of the consensus for staying with the current proposal would be that we have closed off the design space. If we are not agreeing to that, then we have to make the change Richard wants. right? Like they're like it's like a logical like
Yeah, I
this-
think so.
Only two outcomes in any.
Right.
You can't have
Okay.
a third. Yeah.
All right, we're in agreement. All right, then joint iteration, zip iterator by any other name. I don't think that we have any security bearing concerns on
I'm
this.
going to be continuing to agitate for array.zip, but
Great.
you know,
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
The thing is, if there's any new iterator prototypes that are introduced by this, making them discoverable, that's about it, all I can think.
it'll just be adding a helper method to the existing iterator helper prototype. So like, it's not a new
And it will
intrinsic
enable-
other than the method itself.
Right, what I'm saying is that if it doesn't use any, if it doesn't expose any, create any new intrinsics that are
It doesn't create any new top
reachable.
level intrinsics, right? Like every function is a new intrinsic, but like, I assume we only care about like top level because you can spider from there.
Well,
What
no,
we-
that's what I'm talking about. If
Oh.
internally it ends up creating a prototype that is not exposed, reachable through the global as a property walk, we need a way to, we need the
Right.
instructions on how to get at it.
Right. Yeah. But this is just the same as like iterator helper map.
Yes,
It creates something
it's-
with the same prototype. So
Exactly.
Yeah, so long as that we're not doing anything like some of the methods of like map and set, I believe, return iterators that are not have a prototype that is more specialized than the prototype of an iterator in general, that is not discoverable by property walk from global. And we would like to avoid adding any additional like that. So as long as presumably this is named zip, as long as the zip method returns an ordinary iterator without an additional prototype, we're not going to have any issue.
well, so to be clear, it returns something with iterator helper prototype.
Yeah,
which
that's
is
fine.
the same prototype that all the other iterator helpers return. Iterator helper prototype is a hidden intrinsic, but that is already a sunk cost that we've
Yeah,
agreed
and
to.
I believe we agreed to that. Mark, can you confirm we did agree to make
Yes.
adjusting this into?
The iterator helper prototype, basically all of the prototypes that were already previously discussed that needed special discovery code in hardened JavaScript in the SES shim. Those discovery methods are already in there, have been in there for quite a long time for exactly that reason. And we also are taking the stance that those are the last hidden intrinsics to be grandfathered in by requiring all secure systems to manually update their discovery code. And
No,
then
I
going
thought we had set a precedent for the path forward if anything like this needed to happen again, was that it cannot appear magically in new code unless it cannot appear through existing functions calls. It has to be done through new intrinsics that would have to be exposed to the user code. And there has to be documented way of reaching these hidden prototypes through a call mechanism or something like that, using these new methods.
So that would satisfy the hard requirement. I'll just say that the stronger stance that I would certainly advocate for is that any new hidden intrinsic not enter until we have get intrinsics in the language, such that they're discoverable via the get intrinsics proposal.
All right, so deferred import evaluation. I'm not expecting to have security bearing concerns there any more than we've already discussed. Async iterators. What about async iterators?
Kevin's
Oh,
just going to be
async iterator
talking
help.
about his API design changes. Yeah, in particular, like he's really trying to solve he's really trying to address the need for order preserving versus order ignoring helpers, and he's going to talk about that. I don't know exactly. It's hard for me to get my head around exactly what where he's at, but I'm sure the presentation.
I
will be
don't
helpful.
think that we expect any surprises.
Right.
I'm surprised at the order ignoring helpers. What are we referring to?
For async iteration, like Kevin wants, yeah, I mean, this is not a use case I think is important, but Kevin wants to be able to say, like, I want to map over an async iterator in such a way as I'm not like guaranteed to have to run each one in order.
It's being able to move forward in the iterator.
There you go.
Yeah, it's basically being able to do parallel processing
Okay,
for each
okay.
the iterator.
Okay, so that's the So it's the independent of the order in which the
It's to not force a sequence. It's to not force
the parallelism, but I don't remember. Is this a non-determinism with
It's
regard
not.
to order?
It's not. It's to if you have a transform basically on an iterator on an async iterator, it's whether that transform should have the ability to move ahead in the source and process elements of the source in parallel.
What do you mean? What do you mean by parallel?
Concurrent, meaning having multiple pending promises from the callback at any given time.
Instead of having to wait on one promise at a time.
Okay, good. So I remember that, and I'm very enthusiastic about that iterator concurrency proposal. I think it's great. There was nothing non-deterministic about order in that last I understood it.
It's already deterministic in the number of promise turns in the first place. So.
Okay, good.
I have non-security notions about this API that I probably should dig into myself out of band. I think that async iterators require, because they are async iterators, require more knobs. Like for bounded concurrency, for example, versus unbounded concurrency versus I think that serial order should be an option. And yeah, I don't think that one solution does not fit all problems.
I thought Kevin's actually fit everything you just raised.
Then I just need to read it again.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think the current update is that he's going to start with just the serial ones, but like built so that he can add the non-serial ones. I think that's what his update is.
That sounds great.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Anything that introduces that, let's call it overlapped concurrency, overlap, is bounded, if I recall, and that it's opt-in, so that unless you use some of these new operations, that the sort of the base operations all do their work serially.
That sounds perfect. I'll take a look. All right. What the heck is atomics.pause? Did I miss something?
That's the micro-weights.
Oh, it's micro-weight. Okay. We've talked about that one.
So, well, just to reiterate a concern, right now the shared array buffers are effectively normative optional, although there's some spec language problem with whether the spec states that they're normative optional or not. Atomics, I believe, are not, right? The atomics global, according to the spec, always appears. In the absence of a shared array buffer, do the methods of atomic provide the ability to measure duration?
No.
Okay.
Yes.
What do you mean? Yes.
There's like that's already the case. Let me look it up.
Ah, that's depressing.
Atomics.
Well, there's the async
Atomics
wait.
wait and wait async. Take
Wait async is wait. No, because wait you need doesn't work on an array buffer. It only works on the shared array buffer. Wait async is, I think you need shared array buffer as well. I'm not sure for that one.
It does validate integer typed array. I don't know that it requires shared.
In any case, the concern I
It
think
does. It requires shared, but you know, but with shared, it gives you a timer.
Yes.
So
That's fine because I mean, with shared, you've got a million timers.
Yeah.
Well,
The concern is that
technically you only have a timer with shared if you have another thread, but yeah.
Well, this,
right,
this gives you a timer even without the other thread.
Right, which is why it's important that shared array buffers as a whole are effectively normative optional, so that even with a single thread, an environment can omit shared array buffers completely and be conformant.
Yeah,
but
even though the wait async is specified in such a way that it could be replaced and tamed so that you wouldn't be able to measure time through it anymore. I remember going through that at some point, but it's pointless because we don't allow shared array buffer in the first place.
Right. So, so this new thing, pause or something, does it have the same constraint that in the absence of a shared array buffer, it does not enable you to measure duration?
It doesn't allow you to measure duration at all. It is something that says pause for a certain amount of time, but that doesn't let you know that amount of time anyway. Like you could pause, you could not pause, and it would basically be the same thing.
if you set up a clock with a loop around atomics.pause.
What do you mean clock? You have to have already a way to measure time to be able to observe the effects of pause.
Okay, so it doesn't give you an ability to measure duration, but it gives you an ability to impose a constrained duration without itself enabling you to measure it. Okay.
It's a I'm not sure. So atomics pause live locks your process for an amount of time.
Mm-hmm.
So so it's just like taking the base case. If you created a clock where it was just counting how many microtasks had been interleaved between,
but
then
you can't because you're live locked. You can't count anything. Your program is literally not doing anything during that time.
Right. I'm curious. I mean, I'm curious whether. Okay, so the process is starved, so you can't measure what everything else in your process was doing, but you could make a slower clock than you can with Q microtask anyway. Like, I don't know.
Sorry,
I think
what is Q microtask?
On Q microtask is a web API for essentially doing
it's a web API.
It's basically the equivalent of doing promise resolve dot then and then a callback.
Is it presumably, since it's named as Q microtask, it's at lower priority than the promise queue?
No, it's the exact same priority as
it's the exact same priority. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Q microtask is essentially So I wrote a library called ASAP, which was a shim for Q microtask.
Mhm.
And that was the basis for Q.
Okay. Okay. So Q microtask was just equivalent to that, and it's still then the combination of imposed duration plus Q microtask still doesn't give you the ability to use interleaving order to measure duration. So I think I'm not going to object to anything here.
Okay. So the key is that there's no possibility of interleaving.
Yeah,
Okay.
and I just checked, the API actually only takes an iteration number. It doesn't even take anything related to time.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Okay. So error is error.
So error is error
This touches on membrane transparency.
yeah, exactly. It's violating our general design rule that built-ins should only be internal field or internal property, whatever we're calling them these days, internal field sensitive on their this argument, not on a non-this argument. And the other place this came up recently, I want to make very clear, is a very, very different case conceptually, which is the is template object.
Well, I mean, did we ever settle the question for static methods?
No, we didn't. And that's relevant for, sorry, I was spacing out for a second. That's relevant for error.isError. Is that what we're talking about?
When you say, did we ever settle the question? The principle that I just stated applies to static methods. Static methods.
That was not something that most people thought about in plenary, I think, Mark. We were only talking about the prototype set methods when everyone agreed that, yes, the receiver should look at slots and the arguments should look at methods and properties.
Okay, maybe that's all that people had in mind, but I certainly raised the more general question, and I know exactly. I know that I raised it because the issue of promise.resolve came up, and because promise.resolve exactly is a static that looks at an internal method. I mean, sorry, an internal field, internal property, to determine is this thing a promise. And the reason why it's kind of loosely doesn't violate practical membrane transparency is because of venable assimilation. But it's still a a violation of the stated rule. So I was certainly quite explicit about that when we were discussing this.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I guess where it seems like for me is that what you want is a world where the way most people write code, which is chaining methods off things, everything just works in your like membraned environment. But the way that I write code and all my dependencies, which are transitively used a lot of the place, like by a lot of people, is that I don't dot off of something, that I cache a built-in method and call bind it, and then I invoke that later. Now, I'm not arguing everyone else should do that because that's not a good sale, but like that's all. My stuff's already all going to break in your membrane environment because of that.
Right, and I would say that given the motivation for doing that in code that does that, it probably should break in a membrane environment,
right?
Because what it's trying to do is basically a hard and fast branch check that you can trust it to behave the way you expect it to behave. So let's ask the question for errors. Exactly this question for errors, which is in a world of shadow realms that are encased in practically transparent membranes, clearly all the time you're going to get a error created within one shadow realm that goes through the membrane to become something error-like that's visible in the other
But
shadow realm.
Errors
And-
have intrinsic special behavior. Error-like is insufficient.
Well,
Structured
that's
clone checks for errors being special, and node will have special call site displaying behavior when a real error is surfaced to the application that it won't if you throw like 42 or something. So
Okay.
it is very difficult to, like, it's not possible in JavaScript to brand check errors and have special behavior until this proposal, but it is possible in the platform. And that is precisely why we need the brand check to mirror what the platforms already do.
Okay, so let me just ask a expected usage question. This is because it's all in the domain of practicality. There's not a hard and fast absolute here. If you were building a membrane on both, to wrap a shadow realm on both sides, to be practically transparent, and you had some way to brand check errors reliably, when you pass an error through your membrane, would you, on the other side of the on the side sending the error, do a brand check, and then on the side producing the wrapped error, actually create an error object so that on the other side of the membrane, the error representative, the error representing the original error also passed the brand check on the other side?
Yeah, I assume that's what you would do with anything that has slots.
Well, the reason why I find it can't be both an error and a proxy.
Sure.
And the reason why I find it plausible for errors, but not for many other things, is that errors are generally used to carry diagnostic information. The mutability of errors is usually not used to communicate back to the origin of the error. There's nothing preventing it, of course, and if you, since the object can't be both a genuine error and a proxy, it means that if on the receiving side of the membrane somebody adds a property to it, on the sending side you won't observe the property on the error that was sent. So it's a different non-transparency, and then the question is just expected usage pattern. Which way would you expect to go? And in this case, I think I agree. Probably the more practical expected use, and since there's no absolute transparency to be had anyway, is for errors to duplicate them and make the new one an error, rather than to try to use a proxy to mirror a mutation.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's just one of the inherent flaws of proxy. Like, it just doesn't work. It doesn't like give you the it just doesn't give you the ability to transparently proxy things. Like, it only gives you that ability for a subset of things. And
but it's exactly the design rule
right.
that the language currently mostly satisfies. That means that proxies, a membrane built of proxies, is practically transparent because of that design rule. Because anything fetched, any method fetched by normal receiver dot property name open paren,
right, but that right there
will work through a proxy.
I have a question in this regard, and this may reflect my own confusion and lack of understanding. But when I think about this, I think I'm kind of reasoning in parallel with array.isArray.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
does this not would this not raise essentially all doesn't that raise essentially all the same questions? And since that is in the standard, does it suggest what the answers to some of those questions are?
So it suggests an answer that we've
Okay.
decided against,
Sorry.
which is to have proxies right now reflect their target onto the behavior of the proxy, specifically with regard to whether the target is a regular object versus an array versus a function. Those distinctions are by design something that the proxy mechanism, without trapping to the handler, will reflect those distinctions in the target. And the reason we did it for array.isArray is because of JSON. Because JSON already implicitly has an array.isArray in its stringification logic, and we wanted the behavior of JSON serialization to continue to work practically across membranes. So arrays were a special. Arrays were a special case. Yeah,
but like
arrays.
It's fine that arrays are special cases. I wouldn't want error.isError to pierce proxies. That's nutty. But the caveat that you just sort of brushed past of, well, when people just dot off the thing, like that's not. I feel like that's that sort of undermines the integrity of the environment you're trying to create, because that's not the entirety of the language. The entirety of the language is that you don't have to do that. You can borrow methods, and your whole model doesn't seem to, it seems to fall apart in the face of that. And so I'm not sure how useful it is to uphold that environment when you can't actually stop people from doing that.
So the integrity issue is actually where the failure to be transparent when you go out of your way to do a class.prototype.foo.call failing, like for date. Date is a great example of a built-in that proxies don't make a special case for. If you apply date methods from date.prototype manually to a date received through a membrane, you will be sad. And the reason why that is the correct behavior is that the brand check is trying to give you a behavioral guarantee. And when you fetch a method through an object, the normal object polymorphism, the whole point of the normal object polymorphism is the answer is according to the object.
Yeah, no, I mean, I get the theology, but like, that's not, the language isn't constrained to that, and therefore that's an arbitrary artificial constraint that you're assuming in order to make the model work.
Right, it's an artificial constraint that the language today upholds.
Yeah, I mean, so again, I'm not trying to be clear, I'm not trying to like attack the model itself in the, like, it's fine if I think the subset of the language you've tried to carve out and protect is good, and I'm happy with that existing. But like, also, I think that like even the average JavaScript developer has done object.prototype.hasOwnProperty.call for a long time. So like, borrowing methods is an inextricable part of JavaScript, even though nobody does it to the extent I do. It is still like a normal part of the language. And so like, and it doesn't seem like your model allows for that. like takes it into account. And so I think that it would be, I think that both your model would be improved by figuring out a solution for that, and that a constraining proposal design in a way that makes it less ergonomic or more weird to fit your model that has that flaw, I think is also not a trade-off I'm happy about.
So
Like I want the flaw, I want the gap filled, but I
so,
also
I mean,
want
there's a basic syntactic universality that JavaScript obeys, which is the answer is according to the receiver. So when you have a function on the left and arguments, then the answer is according to the function. And if you have an object on the left, dot method name, then the answer is according to the object. So basically, the leftmost thing is the authority of what happens.
that is that's your mental model, but that's actually not how JavaScript works, because
it is how JavaScript works.
the receiver is just a hidden argument to the function. The function gets to decide what it does, and it can completely ignore the receiver if it wants.
No,
The object doesn't
no,
get
hold
in-
on, hold on. The receiver gets to decide what function is selected.
Oh, in that case, yeah, that's true.
Yeah. So and that's
Right.
the case where the object is the leftmost. In the case that you're
Sure.
talking about, where you borrow a method by saying
Yeah, the
date
function
dot
is the
prototype
leftmost.
dot
Mhm.
dot to full year or get full year dot
Yeah.
call, it's the function that's the leftmost. So the leftmost
Yeah, you're
is
right.
the authority of what happens. You're turning control over to the leftmost thing.
Okay. I mean
And
I agree with that statement. That's an unfortunate argument against a syntactic affordance for like the bind operator, but let's not get into that. But I guess what I mean is it doesn't make any sense to me to ask a thing, are you a thing? Because the whole point is we don't trust the object. That's what the point of a is foo or like are you an X predicate. Like the whole point is I don't trust the object. I want the function to be in charge. And so an error, like if you had a prototype method for is error, that defeats the whole point. Because at that point, why not just do instance of error? Because then you can trust the object's symbol that has instance.
Mhm.
So there's
Well,
like precisely zero value, possibly negative value from adding it as a prototype method. The proposal only makes sense if you don't defer to the error, the potential error object.
I think that we're probably not going to come to agreement
Okay.
on the overall bias on this issue, but because of the nature of error, the practical expected nature of errors as thrown across membranes,
Mhm.
I think I'm happy to agree on error is error, and thereby essentially obligate such practical membranes to
Mhm.
produce an error on the other side so that it's a genuine error, and to do that at the price of disconnecting mutability of the error object on the two sides, which is the necessary consequence of not using a proxy.
Okay. I mean, I can certainly live with that. I don't have any need to add future static predicate checking methods, because error is the only remaining holdout from the time before we, from the toString tag mistake. So from now on, there will always be a prototype method that brand checks, and so this should, in theory, never come up again. For error.isError anyway. Okay, cool. Thank you. We're also at time. Is there anything else anyone wants to squeeze in?
Checking. I think that might have been it.
I have a opinions about decimal.
We probably should have discussed the algorithms for signals,
Oh,
which is
but
really interesting.
signals isn't going for stage 2 though, right?
They are not. So I think it's okay
So
that
we
we
have
didn't
time.
discuss it, but
Yeah.
there's definitely a lot of relevance to this group
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
in that discussion.
I mean, I will say for decimals, I've given Jesse my feedback many times that I think the proposal should not be in the language at all if it can't be primitives. So I think it just is completely absurd to have mathematical numbers be like full-on objects. So I don't know if I'm the only one with that opinion, but I tried to use schedule constraints to make sure I'll get to express it.
I do not disagree with Jordan, but I have not been blocking on that basis, but my aesthetics are aligned with what Jordan just said.
Yeah, I mean, unless I'm the only person that unless there's like a lot of people that are in Mark's bucket, or unless how do I put it? If there aren't a lot of people in Mark's bucket, and I'm the only person who wants to block on it, then I might not block on it, but I really want to block on it. So.
My intuition is that there are a lot of us who share Mark's basic take.
Okay.
And so, yeah, maybe you get some support.
Cool. Glad to hear it. It's 11, so I'm sure we all have things to drop to. So.
Yeah,
See y'all next time.
Thanks.